when it's all said and done, the Dolphins will move on from cornerback Jalen Ramsey. NFL media reports that both sides will explore trade options.
A huge Miami Dolphins trade is about to happen, and it's not based on my own speculation, and at least according to their general manager Chris Grier, it's not going to be Tyreek Hill. According to Tom Pelissero, Chris Grier took time to address the media following the trade speculation, and he was asked if Tyreek Hill could also be traded. Chris Grier says that is not anything that we're pursuing. Who knows? If someone wants to come and give me 2 first-round picks, we'll consider it. There is no way that Tyreek Hill at this stage of his career is worth 2 first-round picks, and if that's how Chris Grier is valuing him, then it may be difficult to get a deal done, but we've seen in the past general managers overvalue their players, eventually getting that number down and eventually seeing a trade get done. But at the same time, historically, you've seen general managers say that they are not willing to trade a player and end up trading a player. Most notably when Dave Gettleman said this about Odell Beckham Jr.
We didn't sign him to trade him, if that's what you're asking me.
But for now, this has nothing to do with Tyreek Hill. If you guys remember, the basis of my Tyreek Hill trade speculation was the fact that the Miami Dolphins are currently in salary cap hell. And this was going to happen eventually. I mean, when you recently paid Jalen Ramsey and Tyreek Hill, traded for Bradley Chubb, brought on Jordan Brooks and Teron Armstead, extended Jalen Waddle, and made Tyreek Hill the highest paid wide receiver at the time of his contract, in addition to signing Tua to a 4-year, $212 million contract, eventually that cap hit from Tua was going to become so substantial that you were going to have to make some cuts on your roster. As it stands, the Miami Dolphins have the 4th lowest cap space for the 2026 season. And for the 2025 season, they have the 9th lowest cap space at about $16.5 million. So as a result of this, changes are going to have to be made. When you take a look at the Miami Dolphins' highest earners and the largest cap numbers on the team, the number 1 highest cap number is obviously going to be Tua at $39.1 million. Then it's going to be Tyreek Hill at $27.7 million before we get to Jalen Ramsey at $16.6 million. About 2 years ago, the Miami Dolphins traded for Jalen Ramsey in a move that I would personally say was a huge success because the Miami Dolphins actually had one of the best defenses in the NFL, especially this past year. It's kind of interesting. This past year, the Dolphins had an incredible defense, but it was their offense that was struggling, primarily because they didn't really recover from Tua's injury, and they constantly had players in and out of the lineup. The Miami Dolphins finished 4th in total defense, with teams averaging 314.4 defensive yards against them and only allowing 36 touchdowns against them, which is, by the way, the 3rd fewest in the entire NFL. They ranked top 10 in pass yards allowed average and pass TDs allowed, and Jalen Ramsey played a huge role in that. Or should we say Jalen Finzi? Haha. In Jalen Ramsey's age 29 season, he was one of the best run defense cornerbacks in the entire NFL, one of the best pass rushing cornerbacks in the entire NFL, ranked top 16 in all cornerbacks in overall grade, came up with 2 interceptions. So it's fair to say that the man actually is still performing at a high level at his age. Unfortunately, when you have so much of your salary cap allocated to your quarterback, your wide receiver 1, you also gave Jalen Waddle a huge contract extension as well, at some point you just don't have a choice but to move on from one of your better players on your roster. So as a result, according to Ian Rappaport, the Miami Dolphins and 7-time Pro Bowl cornerback Jalen Ramsey are mutually set to explore trade options, and it wouldn't be a surprise if he played elsewhere in 2025. Miami and Ramsey, due $25.1 million fully guaranteed this season, could be parting ways. Now, the only bad season Jalen Ramsey had with the Miami Dolphins was in 2023, his first season with the team. I guess you could place the blame on Vic Fangio in this particular instance. Miami Dolphins players weren't particularly fond of Vic Fangio either, but if the Miami Dolphins do part ways with Jalen Ramsey, this would be very significant. They already lost Javon Holland this offseason to the New York Giants, who in my opinion is one of the better safeties in the NFL. Even though he had a down year in 2024, they parted ways with Xavier Howard in 2023 as well, even though Xavier Howard hasn't been able to find another team since then. And it's really unfortunate because as a Miami Dolphins fan, this is a little gut-wrenching considering the fact that this team went all in on the Mike McDaniel era. They traded for Tyreek Hill. They drafted Jalen Waddle. They signed the best free agent available to them in 2022 free agency, Teron Armstead, who was just not ever able to stay healthy. And it seems like all of their swings were very good and intelligent swings. They just didn't pan out. Xavier Howard was extended, but unfortunately in the 2023 season, he was a shell of his former self, so they had to cut him. But in 2020, he was the best defensive back in the NFL. And in 2021, he wasn't the best cornerback in the NFL, but he was definitely up there. And he just fell off of a cliff in his latter 2 seasons with the Dolphins. And it's just really unfortunate because these were all really good decisions by the Miami Dolphins. They weren't ever able to even win a playoff game, and they didn't even make it to the playoffs this past year, which resulted in Tyreek Hill saying this.
This is my first time I haven't been in the playoffs, man. So, I mean, for me, like I said, man, I just got to do what's best for me and my family, dog. If that's here or that's wherever the case may be, man, I'm finna open that door for myself, dog. As I'm opening the door, like I'm out, bro. You know, so it was great playing here, but you know, at the end of the day, bro, I got to do what's best for, you know, for my career and, you know, what's best, because I'm too much of a competitor to be, you know, just out there.
Mean you thinking about leaving here?
If it is, hey,
And now it seems like they're just going to get weaker from here. And if you take a look at their offseason, it wasn't necessarily the most exciting offseason. Their biggest signing was Nick Westbrook-Akine from Tennessee. They're hoping that he can bring some size to the Miami Dolphins' very speedy wide receiver core, but he's obviously not a wide receiver 1 or 2. They brought in Ifeatu Melifonwu from Detroit, who was pretty promising during his time with Detroit, in hopes that he could replace Javon Holland, who had a down year last year. They brought in James Daniels from Pittsburgh, who is one of the best run blocking guards in the NFL, ranked 2nd out of all guards in run blocking this past year, which could quite possibly be their best free agent acquisition this past year. They brought Alexander Mattison over from Las Vegas, who was pretty solid for Las Vegas as well, before signing another safety that they're hoping could replace Javon Holland and Ashton Davis, who is also pretty solid. So it's not the splashiest offseason for the Dolphins, and this team has significant needs at interior defensive line and cornerback going into the NFL draft. So if they really want to resurrect their chances at being a contender moving forward, they need to absolutely nail the NFL draft. And to be fair, they've been pretty solid at nailing the NFL draft recently. They drafted Chop Robinson this past year, who is a top 20 edge rusher in the NFL. The year before that, they didn't really have as many draft picks, but they selected Devon Achane in the 3rd round. And that's before we mentioned their incredible 2021 NFL draft, where they drafted Jalen Waddle, Jalen Phillips, and Javon Holland with their first 3 picks. Before we have to mention their less than stellar 2020 NFL draft, where they drafted Tua, Austin Jackson, who has been a little bit below average, Noah Igbinoghene, who's on his 3rd team currently, and those were all 1st round picks, but they made up for it in the 2nd round when they selected Robert Hunt. But Robert Hunt, unfortunately, isn't with the team anymore. So at this point, you might be wondering, what are the most likely destinations for Jalen Ramsey? Well, for one, it's important to note that Jalen Ramsey never requested this trade. Chris Greer even said it himself, saying that, "I will say these decisions aren't done quickly and they are not taken lightly because we spent a lot of time this offseason working through this, talking through things. At the end of the day, Jalen did not ask for a trade, so we went through the process and just felt that after numerous conversations and then talking last week with Jalen and his agent, that it was best to move forward. And it's in the best interest of the Miami Dolphins and for Jalen Ramsey. When Jalen Ramsey is healthy, he's one of the best defensive backs in the NFL. But if you take a look at his game recently, I think it might be best for him to move to safety to prolong his career. And I'm not the only one that feels that way. Asante Samuel also agrees, saying that he may not agree with me, but I bet he would be more productive at safety at this point in his career. His numbers will be crazy, thank me later. Given the caliber of defensive back Jalen Ramsey was in his prime years, years, and the fact that he is still productive now, he could have a Charles Woodson-like end to his career and be able to prolong his career if he makes this decision. I mean, Charles Woodson, Rod Woodson, and Devin McCourty all moved to safety at the end of their careers to great success. But that still doesn't answer the question, what team is most likely to trade for Jalen Ramsey? Well, in order to really understand what team is most realistic, we need to go over Jalen Ramsey's cap hit. A trade before June 1st would leave $29.2 million of dead cap to the Dolphins, representing a $12.5 million cap loss in 2025. A new team would acquire $21.1 million guaranteed this year, $21 million next year, $21.7 million in 2027, and $24 million in 2028. If the Dolphins trade Jalen Ramsey following June 1st, then in 2025 they'd incur a cap penalty of $10.8 million, and in 2026 it would be $18.4 million. So they'd save about $6 million in the salary cap. Some people are speculating that Jalen Ramsey could find his way back to the Rams, and there's clearly no bad blood between Jalen Ramsey and the Rams. I mean, his last name's Ramsey, for crying out loud. But that aside, just take a look at what he commented on Devontae Adams' Instagram post after he joined the Rams. You're gonna love everything about that organization and city. Sheesh, you blessed. November, when the Dolphins visited the Rams and Ramsey made his return to LA, he talked about how much LA meant to him, saying it's still like a home. I never got an opportunity to give a farewell gift to all the people out there. It's like a home to me. It's like a family. I've got some family from out there. My daughter was born out there. Great memories out there. Everlasting memories of community. Always treated me and my family right. Nothing but loved and respected. So still got a lot of ties out there. Still go out there often. A lot of positive energy out there. Nothing like negative that I could say about my time out there. So it doesn't sound like Jalen Ramsey would be opposed to a reunion. In this trade scenario, I'd imagine that the Miami Dolphins would get a 4th round pick and a conditional 3rd/4th round pick based off of Jalen Ramsey's playing time, and the Dolphins would eat a majority of Jalen Ramsey's salary. The value of the draft pick they would receive in return depends on how much of his salary they'd be willing to eat. But for the most part, Dolphins fans seem very, very frustrated at the fact that they'd be willing to trade Jalen Ramsey, who had a great year this past year, and for the most part is very mature and doesn't cause problems behind the scenes, but they would be fine with not trading Tyreek Hill. I mean, this one fan on X even says, with all due respect, if we are trading Jalen Ramsey, you need to trade Tyreek Hill. Not doing so is a joke. The whole world knows the Miami Dolphins are rebuilding again. This is just what happens whenever you have to pay your star QB the amount of money that they did. Another fan even says, what are the Dolphins? You went all in on aging pieces, leaving you with no financial flexibility and fewer rookie contracts than any team in the league. And now we're pivoting from that, and this regime gets to oversee that pivot? I don't know, man. Another team that could potentially trade for Jalen Ramsey, which would be absolutely terrifying, would be the San Francisco 49ers. The 49ers lost Charvarius Ward in free agency, which means there's a pretty decent sized hole in that secondary, and they already have one of the best pass rushers in the NFL in Nick Bosa. They have Fred Warner. The 49ers frequently deploy the cover 3, which is a perfect scheme fit for Jalen Ramsey, but probably the most terrifying team that could swing a trade for Jalen Ramsey that I personally hope would not happen would be the Washington Commanders, primarily because you have a quarterback on a rookie scale contract who was able to make it to the NFC Championship in his rookie year, who also employ a zone defense and also did a remarkable job loading up on defense and offense this past year. They already traded for Deebo Samuel. They traded for Marshawn Lattimore at the trade deadline this past year. They traded for Laramie Tunsil. They already have a future Hall of Famer on that defense in Bobby Wagner. Jalen Ramsey on the Washington Commanders would absolutely terrify me as a fan of the Dallas Cowboys. So let me know in the comment section down below what team you think makes the most sense for Jalen Ramsey. Do you agree with this decision to trade Jalen Ramsey over Tyreek Hill? For those of you guys that don't know the argument for trading Tyreek Hill, we have a completely separate video on that. I'm going to leave it in the end screen and meet you guys there. I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.